All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on WION this hour, where according to an antibody survey that was conducted, the number of coronavirus cases in Tokyo have actually jumped ninefold since last summer. Now, random testing in Japan's capital city showed that 0.91%, that's almost about 1% of the people in Tokyo, exhibited antibodies for COVID-19. The test that was done in June had shown an increase in terms of antibody rates in the city from then on. The study sampled more than 15,000 people. Japan is witnessing a downward trend in the number of coronavirus cases, but the country's government has called on everyone to remain very vigilant and cautious. Japan has also extended the state of emergency until the 7th of March in Tokyo, Osaka and in 8 other prefectures. The extension comes as questions persist over the country's readiness to host the Summer Olympics that are scheduled to be held in Tokyo later this summer. Nearly about one-third of the country's cases were recorded in Tokyo alone. The country's medical system remains under pressure after it recently saw a big surge in the number of COVID-19 infections, and Japan's third wave is said to be the most lethal one, which witnessed the highest number of daily cases. The country has recorded more than several thousands of cases, and more than 5,800 people have also lost their lives due to the virus so far in Japan. And to give us more updates in terms of what is happening in Japan so far as the coronavirus pandemic is concerned, we are joined in by our correspondent Grace Lee, who's joining us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much indeed, Grace, for joining us on this broadcast. And let me begin by asking you this. This Sero survey that was conducted in the capital city of Tokyo points out that nearly about 0.9% of the population in Tokyo has antibodies for COVID-19. What does this mean?
Well, it still means that only about 1% of the population has antibodies. Now, as you mentioned, authorities are asking people to remain vigilant as they say that those antibodies can go away. People will not be immune to the virus. And the government here has really been trying to ramp up measures to ensure that the spread does not go any quicker than what we're seeing right now. There are several measures put in place right now. The state of emergency being extended. They've already put in a revision to a coronavirus law that would allow authorities to fine people who don't follow COVID measures. Restaurants are being asked to shut down early. People are being asked to work from home as much as possible. The government can't stress this enough that people need to bear with them for just another month to see cases go down. For the past few months, we have been seeing some encouraging signs. COVID cases have been on a downward trend. However, hospitals are still at capacity. Death toll is still rising. So there is a lot to be managed here by the government, and they're asking for the public's cooperation in this.
Right now, at this point of time, there are big questions about, staging the Summer Olympics. Now, Japan, over the course of the last year, we saw very few infections in comparison with the rest of the world. But the situation has changed in 2021, where there's been, it appears, a surge in the number of infections that are being recorded. So how is the Japanese government looking at the logistical challenges of actually hosting a safe Summer Olympics if the infections continue to rise?
Well, the Japanese government and Japan's prime minister have been adamant throughout that Tokyo will be able to host the games safely. Just 2 nights ago, we saw the Olympics Committee releasing their playbook on how they'll be able to do so. Some of the guidelines outlined in that playbook included testing athletes before and after they arrive in Japan, giving them additional tests every 4 days, and keeping athletes in a sort of a bubble, not allowing them to use public transport or to mingle with spectators. So they are starting to lay out some concrete plans on how to host these Olympics, but it's not clear if the public is on board with this. Recent polls have shown that about 80% of the Japanese public do not want the games to be hosted. As we continue to see those death toll numbers climb and, of course, the extension of the state of emergency, it's only meant that the public is more and more nervous about the prospect of having international spectators coming in, having athletes come in, especially with doctors and nurses here saying that they're too tired to volunteer for the Olympics as well. That is posing another major question on how the Olympics will be held with this shortage of medical staff. So just a lot of things to deal with for the IOC and for the Japanese government, with just about 6 months away until the Olympic Games are set to be held.
Absolutely, indeed. Japan is all set to host the Olympics later in summer this year, but it has not yet kick-started its vaccination program. The vaccination program, we're given to understand, is likely to start sometime towards the end of this month. Any updates on that, Grace?
Well, we heard an update from the Prime Minister recently promising that the vaccination process will kick off as scheduled at the end of this month. Japanese authorities are still in the process of doing their own tests on foreign vaccines. That's a measure that Japan simply has to do to ensure safety. So they are quite a bit behind other countries such as the US, Canada. Many countries in the Western world have already kickstarted their vaccination programs. So Japan will have just a few short months before the Olympics to try and get as many people vaccinated as possible. In the past, we've heard the Prime Minister say time and again that vaccinations will be key to hosting the Olympics, but it seems that isn't quite the plan anymore. Japan had an ambitious goal of or at least offering vaccines to all of its citizens by the middle of this year. It seems with the current schedule that won't be happening. They aren't even asking athletes to be vaccinated before they come to Japan at this point. The IOC is encouraging it, but they say it's really up to each country. Athletes should not be jumping the queue to get vaccinated before participating in the Olympics. So it seems they are trying to kind of fix the schedule as they go, fix the agenda as they go as well. But there are still some major questions surrounding how much of the population will they be able to vaccinate before the games kick off.
All right, we'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Grace Lee, for joining us and getting us all those updates from Tokyo there. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.